every now and then I spend a lot of time just, you know, going through old material, going through old Marvel and DC related material. Definitely stuff that I own, haven't read in a long time, don't even really remember, considering how far it dates back. And it's always cool to compare, contrast what exists now, themes that exist now versus what would happen, let's say back, like back in the day, right? Now Marvel and DC as well, it's a wealth of different comic books, right? So because it's been around for so long, you don't necessarily have to depend upon reading the new stuff. And I read the new stuff because, again, this is sort of my thing, and I want to know the direction that they're taking the new characters. These are characters that I grew up loving. But if you were just a guy that just wanted to just read a comic book story or line, there's so many different comic books that exist with Marvel, stuff that you probably never heard of because it never, like, it's not one of the main comic books that they've been pushing. Definitely Marvel. Marvel has a lot of that stuff that you probably never heard of, and maybe we spend a video doing that again. Not a video, maybe we're in a series doing that, going through some very underground or under the radar, more so Marvel and DC related stuff. Like I said, I do want to do some blast from the past stuff, and we'll do all of that once we get the new video studio. So I was reading Nomad. Now Nomad is he used to be Bucky. He was Bucky is kind of like Robin, right, with DC. Whereas there have been multiple ones. There've been multiple Bucky's. The one that definitely the one that was recently revived, became the Winter Soldier. That's not this one. That's Jack Monroe is his name. Now, I don't even know if Nomad is still alive, to be completely honest. If he is, or Jack Monroe that is, I haven't heard from him. So he's probably dead. They probably killed him off. But I got to issue 9, and there was a villain a villain by the name of Epcot, black villain. And I was sitting there thinking that hardly ever is done anymore. Now he wasn't around that long. But, and I guess to use some backstory, I guess before I go into that, Nomad I don't want to say just really good, because it's not your standard Marvel comic. Definitely, if you read some of this stuff, it's kind of dark, in a sense, more adult oriented. In a sense, takes place in the early 90s. This part of the story is going along the lines of LA, right? So there's this clique that he's sort of running with, that he's allied with, called the Undergrounders. And part of this clique has, legs. She's a prostitute in the clique, and it makes for an interesting story if you want to read it and you want something a little different, not your run of the mill sort of story. No, Marvel used to drop edgy stuff like this all the time back in the day, but they got into some issues with a gang called Pipeliners, or the Pipeline, and one of the guys is going around killing off these Undergrounders, right? And his name is Eptide. Eptide is Ebbtide, if I'm not mistaken. Now, clearly black villain, and he gets into it, with Jack Monroe, aka Nomad, and then Nomad does end up killing him by the end of the book. And he knows the consequences, so he knows that he has to end up leaving LA because of all of this. But it just got me thinking how they don't really have a lot of black villains. Think about it. Current Marvel, usually the villains that are black that they'll put out there are villains that are tied to other black characters. Rarely do you see that where you'll get black villains that, stick around and will even be villains of white characters. You really don't ever see that anymore. Not to say that it doesn't exist. What's the name that's with the records? He appears in the Doctor Strange comic book issue 2, the new one, the Surgeon Supreme. But that's part of, wrecking crew. That's part of the big clique, and that's what you would really see. You would see these guys that are like henchmen that are black. You see that a lot more often than what you have when like an individual dominant, right, black, just villain, just a guy that's there to kill the main person that's in the story or combat the main person in the story that's black. That it just doesn't happen. Now, we can sit here and debate why that's the case. I don't really know. I mean, I can assume that considering the people that make these comics nowadays, all socially aware and socially active, they think that it's probably a negative depiction of black people, definitely black men. You know what I mean? So it's stereotypical. Maybe they would find that, and maybe that's why they don't. But the thing about that is this odd to me is that some of the characters that we've seen stick around over the years have been villains, right? And that's part of comics. Villains. It's okay for them to be black. This one, granted, didn't last that long, but he showed up, wreaked havoc, killed off some people, and he got killed off. But so it's more of a villain of the month type of thing. But still, he's a black villain, and there's just not that many of them around. And the ones that are around, again, they appear more so in a team setting as like a henchman in a team setting. Whereas to this one was they were fearing this guy, and he was going around again killing off these undergrounders. So my question, I guess, to Marvel and the right is like, where are the black villains? Like, yes, there's black villains that are tied to other black characters, right, in those settings. But why limit it to that? You weren't scared to do that back in the Gap. But I do think that will create more opportunities to have characters, again, that stick around. It doesn't always have to be a hero. Again, some people's favorite characters are villains. Look at the Jokers of the world. And yes, there's been heroes that have. DC's done a great job in developing their villains, but they stick around. They're adversaries of a lot of different characters and such. But they're villains. They in itself have origin stories. They in itself have complicated histories that make them, relatable in a sense, and they are tied to some of these main characters. I was just like, man, you don't see that. I'm reading this. I'm like, you just don't see it. But once upon a time, believe it or not, Marvel was not scared to have black villains. Now, you hardly ever see it. Not to say that you don't, but you hardly ever see it, man. You hardly ever see it really in mainstream comics, unless they are, again, part of a larger group, or they are combating like another black character or something like that. Like, obviously, you're gonna see Black Panther, combat other black characters all the time, but you just don't really see that. Certainly with villains of white characters, you don't see that a lot. And again, if you are going to pull this whole card of you want these characters to, or more quote unquote diverse characters, you can't limit them to heroes. That's just the reality of the situation. You cannot limit them to heroes. So we'll see, man. I just think like, dude, where are the black villains?